What's up, everyone? Welcome to Unmasked, where things are discovered, uncovered, brought to the light, and made known. I'm your host, Lamar Barrett, coming live from PG County, Maryland. If you're interested in finding out about the untold stories behind being a college coach, this is the show for you. Being a former assistant men's basketball coach for 16 years, there are so many untold stories behind the scenes in the life of a college basketball coach. Now, let's unmask them. Today's guest is a young and bright assistant coach with a tremendous basketball mind. And I say young just because I think he's young in age, not young in experience. He's been in the business now 13 going on 14 years. And then he's an excellent talent evaluator, a tremendous teacher, a professional. Always been that way ever since we go back to the days when he was a player at St. Augustine and in New Jersey. We'll talk about that a little bit. First met him probably in summer 2001. He's a future head coach in this business. I mean, he just has it. He always has. He's always been a coach on the floor. And he's a Linwood, New Jersey native, Scott Greenman. Now, Scott, tell you a little bit about him before we bring him on. Played at Princeton, where he was a all-Ivy selection his senior year. Started for 3 years, went to the NCAA tournament. Played for Coach John Thompson III. And then after he finished his career, he also, played in Israel for a year before getting into what he probably always knew he was going to be, and that was a coach. He became a assistant coach at Princeton University, for 3 years before going back and then working for the guy he played for in college, in John Thompson III at Georgetown. He was assistant director of basketball ops. Then he, after 1 year, he became the director of basketball ops at Georgetown University, and he had a chance to probably work closely. I think he was basically his assistant a little bit at Georgetown with Mike Brennan, where he had a chance to become the top assistant coach at American University in 2013, where he's presently now getting ready to go into year 8. And like I said, there's a guy that I've been knowing for a long time, but also he had a chance, and this is probably a great experience for him in 2009. And I can't forget that coaching the Maccabi team in Israel, the under 18, and they ended up winning the silver medal over there. And but like I said, it's a guy I've been knowing, since the summer of 2001 when we were at Eastern Invitational then, which is now the Hoop Group, and then we were fortunate to play them in December 2002 at Slam Dunk to the Beach, and we ended up beating them. This one I was at Oxon Hill, but I always knew Scotty was going to be good. I probably scouted him that summer a little bit at camp, and but I want to welcome to the show Scotty Greenman, terrific young and bright assistant coach, as I said. Welcome to the show, Scotty.
Thanks, Lamar. Appreciate you having me. I've watched a bunch of these, and I'm excited and a little bit scared to be on. No, that was the worst game of probably the worst game of my high school career against you guys at the Slam Dunk to the Beach. I think I threw the ball to your team, about the same amount of times as I threw it to our own team. So I try not to think about that, but thankfully every time I talk to you, you bring it up. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I just thought I had to throw that little jab in because I remember y'all when we was at Georgetown in the early 2000s. I think y'all, beat us pretty bad. So I always got to have something to come back because I do remember that game. But you guys have done a terrific job at American University as well. We'll get right into it, man. I mean, let's get unmasked. That's what we're here for. Scotty, you actually played, your 4 years at Princeton, started for 3 years and had an outstanding career there. I don't think people understand. If you haven't been in the Ivy League, I don't think people understand how good the Ivy League is. I was fortunate to coach there at Brown, so for a couple of years, and I know how tough, it's always been, when you were in the league, it was, you and Penn and usually at the top, and now it's, it's Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Penn, those are usually your top four. And when I was in the league, it was Cornell, when they had a great 3-year run. So now you're playing, you're going to transition, you go and play in Israel for a year, but you come back to your alma mater and you jump into coaching. And everybody thinks you know, from a player standpoint, not just even jumping into college basketball. Okay, I'm working for the guy. You didn't work for the guy you played for, but you know, Sydney, who was an outstanding coach, I'm sure gonna get another job eventually. Again, he's associate head coach at Air Force now. But I mean, there's no handbook, man, to being a college coach. Tell me about the first day, first week, first month after things are done with human resources or orientation, especially when no one gives you direction. Because you like now you've thrown in. And the one thing
Right.
about it is when you're assistant coach in the Ivy League, like you're recruited. So talk about that experience.
Yeah, well, first I'd say going with the unmasked theme, I've unmasked my work situation. So I think I'm the first person, hopefully the last, to do an interview with a piggy bank in the background in my son's room. My chair is literally 1 foot off the floor right now. So that's where we are here. But moving on to the question. Yeah, no, so I like you said, I just come back from playing overseas, kind of body fell apart with injury, so I was done over there. And I was able to get in contact with Sydney through Coach Thompson, because Sydney had just worked at Georgetown as an assistant. They just gone to the Final Four, and he got the Princeton head coaching job. So Coach Thompson put in a good word. I helped out with some camps over the summer at Princeton. I actually worked at Hoop Group for their elite camps as a counselor for a couple of weeks when I came back. So I did have an itch that a field I wanted to get into coaching. So Sydney hired me, which was a leap of faith by him, just because we didn't know each other, but we obviously had mutual connections and both played at Princeton. But so it was interesting because the whole staff was pretty new. So Sydney hired Brian Earl, who was an incredible player, is now the head coach at Cornell. Was one of the best players in Princeton history. But he hadn't been coaching at the time. He was working selling insurance, actually. And so his first day was like my first day. And neither of us had coached before. So we're just kind of sitting around the office looking essentially at Sydney and Tony Newsome, who was also on staff, for direction. And then they were both great. So watching them helped us kind of learn what to do. But recruiting, yeah, I mean, the funniest thing, like initially I my first summer, I didn't do much on the road because I was, brand new, 23. I kind of was the guy around the office that part of the year, my first summer. But I remember they'd come back from a tournament and been like, here's our list of guys that we really like, and kind of gave each person on staff like 10 people to call. And so I'd assumed that everybody on this list was like someone that they had seen, which would make sense. But one of the kids on the list, unbeknownst to me, was just somebody that, Tony had talked to another coach about and was like, hey, we should look into this kid. So I called up the high school coach, and he's a pretty prominent New England prep school coach. This is like literally my first recruiting call. So I'm like, hey, coach, saw Joe play last week in Connecticut, and one of our coaches saw him, and we really liked him. I just wanted to follow up. And he's like, who saw him? And I was like, I think it was Tony Newsome on our staff. He saw him play. I wasn't there. He's like, well, he didn't play. He wasn't at the event. He's like, how did you see him play? I was like, well, he's on a list that our coach. I started like mumbling. I'm like nervous talking to this prominent prep school coach. He's like, well, he didn't play. He wasn't at the event, so I don't know what you're talking about. Thanks for calling, and hung up on me. And I was like, all right. Damn, this recruiting thing is going to be a little bit harder than I thought. So that was like literally my first recruiting call. And it was, it's funny now because I actually am friends with the guy, and Tony Newsome called and kind of called him up and explained the situation. But that was like my intro to recruiting and coaching. And then later that week, so I'm like, same thing. I'm listening to Tony and Sydney make these like great recruiting calls, and they are, pros and know how to do it. And I'm in Princeton, our office is like, at the time where it was just like it wasn't even big. It was just a room. And we had like, dividers in between each desk. And I had like this makeshift desk. And so we all had, everyone could hear everybody. We were, literally 3 feet from each other. And so every call, unless you took it on your cell phone, you were taking it in front of everybody. So I was calling up the same thing. I was calling up like a coach, and I was leaving a voicemail, And I said, hi, this is Scott Greenman from Princeton. And then I just like, I don't say I blacked out, but it was like I had the most incoherent voicemail you could possibly leave. Like I was calling to talk to Coach Thompson about Johnny, who transcripts. We need to get the transcripts. Can I talk to somebody in admission? I mean, the guidance. My number is, and then like my lips went dry. And I couldn't. I was 609, whatever, and like disastrous voicemail. And everybody was in the office. And so like I hung up and there was like silence for like 2 seconds and then just like burst, hysterical laughing from everybody else in the office because it was so outrageous what I had just said on the phone. So that was like my first week of recruiting. So I was like, man, I gotta polish up a little bit before I feel confident about what the hell I'm doing. So that was my intro to coaching and recruiting.
Wow. Yeah, I can understand it like that. Like you said, it's new and it's different. So like, and that's what people don't realize. Like, and then once you get it, you get it. I mean, you got to have your own spiel, and so I understand it. So we're going to talk about recruiting. Like you brought it up a little bit, so I'm sure that's not. We all know that recruiting is the lifeline of college athletics. That's like if you don't get good players, you don't get good people, and in your case, you got to have very good students, and that's something you were a great student. I still talk about you were all Ivy academic as well. And so you've been in that realm, whether it was at Princeton, whether it was at Georgetown, and now, at American, like you've always been in that academic realm. But can you talk about your best and worst recruiting story? Just because it get a little bit of insight, because it is important. Recruiting is so important, man. And that's what people don't understand. You have to get it right. And that's when kids have those successful careers, good people, good person. I mean, good people, good player, good student. Talk about that, your best and worst recruiting story.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to give a few an example or two, but I mean, I think the biggest thing in recruiting is trying to sift through what people tell you. Because a lot of times, I think it's hard to find the truth. And so everybody's going to try to, basically promote their players and tell you the great things about them because that's their job to help them get noticed. So it's like, if you can build relationships to where you can talk to people more honestly about players and kind of get to the crux of it earlier, I think that helps kind of, delineate the good from the bad and the guys you want to go after versus the guys that might have a little, baggage that you don't want to deal with. But I also think there's a ton of luck involved. I mean, at the end of the day, you're still taking people that, you've researched and about, but, you don't really know until you coach them. And so, I think for as many times you get a good player that you love, you also will take guys and you're like, man, in the year after, you're like, man, he's not what we thought he would be or whatever it is. So I think there is luck involved. And I think that, the more talking you do, the more calling, the more you find out about guys, the more informed of a decision you can make. And that's kind of all you ask for. But like to give an example, so like, like this kid on our team now, Connor Nelson. So this is his recruiting story. So, we're on the phones all the time, watching film, blah, 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 and we've recruited guys really hard and we've gotten them. And then maybe they haven't been as good as we thought, or they have been, or, some guys transfer, whatever. You recruit guys that really well, as good as you can recruit them and you love them and they love you and blah, blah, and then they transfer, you know what I mean? So that's like part of it too. So there's like a lot that goes into it and there's so many factors to play in, but like, so Connor, I think is funny because, we had never heard of him. His AU coach calls me last June and is like, hey, I have this kid who's at a junior college right now. He's taken a few Division I visits, but nobody, offered him a scholarship on the visit. And he really thinks he's a Division I player. He wants to prove himself. I think he'd be great for you guys. I've seen guys play. Here's some film. Let me know what you think. And so, watched the film and I was like, wow, he looks really good and absolutely, definitely for a walk-on. So my first thought was like, okay, well, you know, not like what's wrong, not what's wrong with him, but like, let me just make sure, you know, if we're taking a player walk, you know, anybody, whether it's a walk-on scholarship guy like that, he's the type of person that we want to coach. He doesn't have, you know, there's not some red flag that I don't know about. So I made a bunch of calls, talked to a bunch of people, and everybody was like over the top, you know, in love with everything about him. So I showed Coach Brennan. He was like, yeah, let's try to get him. So, you know, I called Connor. So he was at junior college and he had done a year of prep. So he was a little, you know, more mature. He's probably 20 at this point. So I was like, hey man, you know, really like what I've seen. We would definitely want you to walk on, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm doing it. You know, and I was like, okay. So, you know, now at the time, like, okay, great. You know, he was like, well, I was like, you know, are you going to visit campus at all or anything? He's like, no, you know, I'm good. I've done my research, talked to my parents. They think it's a great opportunity. So long story short, he comes within 3 weeks of being on campus. You know, he's clearly not a, you know, he's a scholarship person. So a scholarship opened up, you know, a month or so into school. We gave it to him. And now heading into this year, I mean, he's a starter, you know, one of our better players, and he's a hell of a player. So there's, for as many stories as you're like, hey man, we were on this guy from his sophomore year and blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, here's one where you made one phone call, you got somebody who was initially a walk-on and is now going to be one of your better players. So I almost think there's, you know, there's a lot of those stories too, where it's like, hey, this happened to work out. And there's also ones where, you know, it happens to not work out, where you think it's going to go well and it doesn't. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Like that, yeah. I mean, to find that and you know, and find a potential walk-on that becomes a scholarship player within 3 weeks, and that doesn't happen a lot. But no. Like you said, that's a great story.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, this is a pretty funny one. So last year, 2 years ago, you know, we had been recruiting this kid for a while, and I recently talked to all of his people, and they're all like, hey, he loves it. You know, I think he's going to commit to you, blah, blah, blah. You know, so this is like Monday. So we're in a staff meeting Tuesday. I'm like, hey, you know, so-and-so I'm hearing all the right things from his people. It sounds like he's really interested. Are we willing to, like, we're definitely taking his commitment if he calls, right? Yeah. And then he calls like while we're having this conversation. So I'm like, all right, we're taking this commitment, you know, blah, blah. And everyone's like, yeah, sure. We love him. I'm like, all right, good. This is going to be it. So I take the call, walk out. He's like, hey coach, you know, just want to let you know, I decided to commit, and he names another school. So he's going elsewhere. So I'm like, okay, you know, congratulations. I understand. Yeah. You know, good luck, blah, blah. And I walked back in the office, kind of like tail between the legs, you know, because it was like the only time I had been confident in however many years of recruiting that we were actually getting this person, and we didn't. And I was like, never outwardly portraying confidence again about a player, because I just walked in and it's, you know, Matt and Eddie and Coach Brennan and Sam, and we're all just sitting there and they're just like, you know, obviously great staff, so we like laugh it off, but it was clearly embarrassing, and you know, you don't count your chickens before they're hatched in recruiting.
That part is so true. So true, Scott. You can't count them. That's the one thing. And I like to go into this. Like, what did you? Because people don't understand this. And I say, what did you have to sacrifice to achieve your current level of success? Because I don't think people understand that college basketball, they always want to know, when is your downtime? Well, there is no downtime. I mean, we 355, 360 days out of the year. I mean, you're working. Like, even when you're on vacation, you got to be on the phone, talking with recruits, trying to set them up, trying to come to campus. You try to sneak away from your wife, you know, so it's really never any downtime, but there's things that you do have to sacrifice if you want to be in this profession. What did you have to sacrifice to achieve your current level of success?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the things that most people say, you know, like, especially when you're like 23 to 30, whatever it is, like you're missing weddings, you're missing friends' weddings, you know, you're missing friends' vacations, you know, hey, we're going to go to whatever, California for a week. You want to come? No, you know, I'll be in Las Vegas, but I'll be in the Ox Gym 8. You know, so it's like, you know, you miss things like that. But honestly, that to me wasn't like a huge thing, because I was kind of used to that as a player, you know, having to sacrifice for kind of what you love. I think as you get older, though, the harder thing is like missing the family events. So when you have, a wife and kids and grandparents who are getting older and parents who are getting a little bit older, I think like the holiday gatherings kind of mean more at that point. So when you do miss those, it's a bit of a bummer. Luckily, I mean, Coach Brennan, Coach Thompson, everybody I've worked for were great in that regard. Like they know that it's, there's enough pressure and competition as it is. And so they didn't want any added pressure on you having to, constantly be, it wasn't like a maniacal thing. It was like, hey, you obviously have to do your job, but like we're reasonable human beings here and we want you to see your family, we want you to be, so they've been great. So I've been lucky to work for people who kind of understand that there's a balance. So that's been nice.
And that's always a plus. Work for people who are family people and understand that. That's the best thing. I always like scouting reports, man. Like, those are huge. And I know some people do it differently. I've worked for someone they actually worked for a Princeton guy. And so I know a lot of times you guys do things a little differently. I'm not, so I've been in it, so I've talked, I know a little bit about it, and I'm gonna let you talk about it a little bit. But what has been your best and worst scouting reports over the years? Because, you do look at a lot of film, and I'm sure Coach Brennan does as well. That's just what he does. But then, like, as always, you want to try to be detailed, but you kind of, you do what you do. And then you figure out, like, hey, this is what we do. You still want to know people tendencies. You still want to know personnel. And there's always, that one person, like, Coach Brennan, he's struggling shooting the ball. So we might not, we got to still close out. He's a Division I player. But then he's struggling and he makes 3 in a row. And Brennan probably looking at you like, what I'm not going to say what he said, but he's a little, like, yeah, well, you told me he wasn't a shooter. No, I didn't. I said he's struggling shooting. That's a big difference. But talk about your best and worst scouting report. And you can talk about, you don't have to be specific, but like how you guys do it a little bit from a scouting report. I know Princeton, like I said, they do a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think each coach just kind of does his own thing. Like, when I was with Sydney, we were very particular about just like, which way we're going to force guys, and then from 3 days out, kind of hammering that home. Like, this is Scott Greenman. You're making him go right. You're not letting him shoot threes. This is Lamar. You're going to, run him off the line, but you're playing him to shoot pull-ups. And it was like, we really hammered that home to the guys. Coach Thompson, it was, a little bit, probably a little bit less, but we had like, we ended up giving them like packets to like little, pamphlets of handouts in addition to that. We did a lot of film. And then with Coach Brennan, it's probably more so being good at like how we're going to guard, and concepts, and not necessarily as, you need to know personnel, but we're not, as crazy about that as we are like, this is how we're defending, this is how we're rotating, this are the types of plays, this is how we're guarding each play, and this is how we play. But it's more so, an 80% focus on what we need to get better at, and then 20% kind of what the challenge is going to be for each individual game, because it's different. But like we wouldn't, so I think each coach goes about differently. But everyone has, I'm sure, like you said, this story, but mine was, I was my second year at Princeton coaching. We were playing at Manhattan, and Chris Smith was there, who was J.R. Smith's younger brother. And he was like, at the time, he was like having a good year, obviously, and he's a really good player. And he's averaging like, I don't know, 12, 15, 14 points. But he was like shooting like 25% from 3. And he was a specimen, and he was good. So it was like, we got to kind of pick our poison a little bit with like, I'm like, look, let's make him shoot the same thing, make him shoot threes. Yeah. So, how it goes. 2 for 2 in the first half, 18 points. I'm like, stick with it. It's going to get better. Same thing in the second half. He ends up with like 35, and he's 4 for 5 from 3. and we lose by 8 or whatever. But the funny one now is like, we play Loyola, Maryland, who runs a very similar offense, all right, with actions that are similar. And each time we've played them, neither team can stop each other. So like, I don't know what we averaged, like 75 or something like that points a game last year. But then when we play them, the score is like 92 to 88 and, you know, whatever. And it's my scout and I've, you know, been around this offense for, you know, whatever, a variation of our offense for however many years. And same thing with Tavares, and neither of us and Coach Brennan, and we haven't been able to guard each other. And we're like, we are guarding, you know, you're practicing against this similar offense every single day in practice. How? And so it either shows, you know, it goes to show you that the offense, you know, if you're smart and run, it can be run really well no matter how you play, which I think is true. But it's also like, what the hell am I doing if we can't stop a team that's doing the same thing? But it's also kind of funny because Holy Cross was similar when they had Bill Carmody was the coach. They ran similar actions, and it was the opposite. Like neither team could score. So it's like, I don't know. So sometimes it's, you know, a little bit out of your control. But, you know, you don't remember the good scouting reports. You only remember the ones where it didn't turn out the way you want.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And it's interesting because I remember Tavares worked for Carmody at Northwestern. I remember that. Actually, we were at American and we went to Northwestern and played them. So, yeah, I mean, and I watched both of you guys play last year. I think I watched Lowell versus Navy. I think I watched you guys. I know I was in a practice, and then I watched you guys against Georgetown. So you're right. It's similar. It's interesting. Like you high scoring, and then like you said, you played Holy Cross when Comedy was there, and it was like, wow. I mean, are we gonna get out the 40s? You know, like it's like a struggle.
Right.
But no, that's
well, they started running a different offense because it was like their first year, and they were like, they know what we're doing, we can't, so let's just try. You know, and sort of half they were just like running around in motion, and they didn't score doing that either. So it's been pretty fun going up against it.
That definitely is. You've been in it, like I said, like you don't realize, like I look at it and I'm like, you know, I know how experienced you are, and you've been at 13 years as a coach, you know, but you still, I mean, your playing days still count. So you've been in this for a long time. What's the biggest challenge, man, you think you've experienced since you've been in college coaching?
I mean, I think, you know, I'll mention this briefly, although it's an important one. Is like just getting, you know, trying to get to each player is a difficult thing because not everybody, you know, has the same motivations, the same reasons for doing things. So I think that can be talked about ad nauseum. But I think that in a broader picture, I think like being good is a really big challenge. You know, like winning, you know, just winning games in college is really hard. And so, you know, similar to like when you're a player making the jump from high school to college, and you're like, I was really good in high school, I'll be really good in college and, you know, be an all-league player and we'll go to the NCAA tournament every year and, you know, all that stuff. It's similar in coaching where you're like, yeah, I think I'm really driven, I'm smart, I'm going to work really hard and we're going to win. And if we don't win the first year, we'll obviously build, you know, progressively each year and be winning by year 4. And I just think you don't understand how, I don't know, tender is the right word, but like fragile is probably a better word, like how fragile winning is. You know, how many things have to go right in order to have a good year, you know, let alone sustain it. You know, injuries, just mindsets of players, you know, all these things, you know, a bad recruiting class, whatever it is, like can quickly offset, you know, progress and often it's not a linear progression to success. And so I think the biggest challenge is just, you know, sticking with it and being prepared to react when things aren't going well, because it's not going to be, you know, just, you know, peaches and cream your entire time. It's going to be setbacks, and you're going to have losing seasons, and then you got to try to bounce back. So I think just, you know, winning and being good is challenging, and I think that's why a lot of, you know, that's where the competition comes in, because it's like, you know, year to year it's a new challenge, and so that makes it a lot of fun.
Awesome. So, do you ever find that there are things about you that people misunderstand? What are they? Because, like, when I see you've always been, when you walk in the gym or things like that, you're always smiling, you're always in a good mood. Like, is there things that, you know, like I said, that people might misunderstand about you when at any time? And what are they?
Yeah, I'm miserable. No, I don't think so. I mean, I try to be, you know, honest and be myself in every circumstance. So I mean, I'm in, you know, I think like every coach, so when you're on the court, it's intense and you try and do everything possible to get everybody to reach their potential and be really good. But no, I don't mean, but I think what you see is what you get. I'm not hiding some crazy persona or anything like that. I just, you know, this is me.
Awesome. What do you, we all, this people, you know, we're in an educating business. That's what we do. It's still education. It may not be in a classroom, but I always say the basketball court is a classroom. You're always teaching, but like, what would you, or what do you try to teach your players besides basketball?
I mean, generally speaking, it's like, I think, you know, try to get them to do what you're supposed to do all of the time. No, you know, do the right thing all of the time. And then give everything that you have while you're doing whatever that may be. So, you know, when you're in class, be fully invested in paying attention. You know, when you're, for the 2 hours that you're on the court, be fully invested in getting better and working on your game and doing everything that the coaches are asking, and et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, we try to, you know, basically we try to do everything we can to help the players maximize their potential, you know, on the court and off the court. And so we keep it pretty simple in the messaging. And then I think as, you know, as issues arise with each player or groups of people, then you kind of go into the nitty gritty of, you know, how to approach each day and time management and all the kind of things that come with it. So, you know, it's not, it's something that we deal with as it comes. But I think the other thing that we try to, you know, and I don't know if we do a great job of explaining this to them, but it's like, you know, and I think we do, actually, I shouldn't say it. I think we do, they understand, like, we want to be honest with the guys about everything. And so, and when, you know, we want to coach them because we want them to maximize their potential and be as good as they can be. And, you know, college basketball for these guys and for, you know, college athletics in general is probably like, you know, the last time in a lot of these guys' lives that like people really, really, really are invested in them, like improving and getting better and being great. You know, it's like, that's what we go home and think about at night is like, how can, you know, Josh Alexander on our team, you know, how can he score more in the post? How can he defend better? How, you know, and like, that's what we think about. And so it's like, even if you know, once you graduate, like your parents still care about you and your coaches care about you, but now we have, you know, a new group of guys that we're coaching every single day. And it's like, you're going to get a job or whatever it is. And you're going to have a boss, but you know, that person's not going to really care, you know, how you're living your life and going about it. And are you maximizing your potential? You know, they're going to be like, hey, did you get done what you need to get done? Okay, great. And even professional basketball. I mean, like, you know, in college, you have teammates and friends, and these guys are like, you know, lifelong buddies that you end up, you know, having friendships with forever. But like professional basketball is night and day different. And so I remember my first practice in Israel, the coach was like, hey, it was like 5 new Americans on the team. And then he was like, hey, just so you guys know, like, I don't care about you. He was like, you can do whatever you want off the court. You can live your life however you're going to live it. All I care about is whether you're producing and doing what you got to do when we play games and at practice. And he's like, and if you don't perform when you're here, you're not going to be here for long. And that was like the, you know, welcome to pro basketball moment. But that's like the mindset. And, you know, guys are changing teams every year and guys are getting cut. And it's a, you know, it's a business, obviously. And so is college basketball. But I think the camaraderie and like the caring from the coaches and the way they view it, you know, as part of an educational system here is, you know, is night and day different. So I think that's something we try to, you know, instill in them. I wouldn't say teach them. It's just like, hey, you know, we're trying to help you in every way possible, in every aspect of your life.
Awesome, man. That's awesome. What's the biggest accomplishment you've experienced since you become a college coach?
Biggest accomplishment. I'd say, you know, probably one at each spot that I've been at. So at Princeton, you know, we were, we were 6-23 our first season when I was a coach. And it was, you know, the worst team that Princeton's ever had, record wise. And so, you know, just the next 2 years, we had the biggest turnaround in the history of the program. So we went from 6-23 to 22-9 and won 2 games in the CBI. And so just kind of going through that, you know, turning the program around and seeing kind of like the day-to-day work and the hardships that went into kind of the whole process was very enjoyable, because that's why you do it. Like you're saying, you're teaching and coaching, and just kind of see these, you know, freshmen come in who are, you know, don't understand how hard it is and don't understand what it takes, to then see them as juniors completely transform into these guys who are tough, you know, good players, or coaching the younger guys, all that stuff. I mean, that's why you coach, and that makes you proud. And so like, that was a lot of fun. So that was at Princeton. And then at Georgetown, I'd say, you know, winning the Big East regular season championship was a great year. So that was 2013. But for the similar reasons, like we had, you know, a bunch of trials and tribulations where, you know, we lost our second leading scorer midway through the year. We started off the Big East 2-3, and then finished, you know, we had lost the top 3 scorers from the previous year, and then we finished the Big East 12-1, and for a share of the Big East regular season championship, and, you know, won at Syracuse, which was like the last home game when we were both part of the Big East. And then won at home against Syracuse to clinch the Big East championship. So that was a lot of fun, but it was also, you know, not just, it was fun because it was challenging, and it wasn't like, oh, 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, you know, it was like up and down, and then kind of got to a place where they figured it out a little bit, and you end up being good. And then in American, I think the two were like going to the NCAA tournament our first year, similarly because the team, you know, had a rough year the year before. And so we were able to go from 10-20 to 20-10. Now there was a great player who was sitting out the year that the previous year that we were able to coach, Pee Wee Gardner. So that obviously had a huge made a big difference. But just kind of seeing the team who struggled the year before turn it around, and same thing that year. We started off that year 3-7, I think. And then went on like a 10-game win streak to start the Patriot League play. So it's like, going through the hard parts to see the light is fun. And then even the last 2 years here have been really rewarding, just because we had two, down years 3 and 4 years ago, where we had a bunch of young guys, had a couple injuries, whatever else goes into having bad years. And then the kind of crux of that group stuck it out, didn't transfer, stay with it, and then, finished in the top 4 2 years ago, and then second place this year or last year, and had the player of the year in our conference, went 12-6. So just, again, that kind of transformation is fulfilling.
Yes, it is. Definitely is, man. So, and I'd like to ask this, what is the strangest, weirdest thing a player has done outside of the basketball court?
Well, I'll tell you what, you play overseas, strange stories to fill a notebook, but I'm not going to tell any of those because I don't think they'd be appropriate. But for purposes of this, I'd say the two that were like pretty bizarre and stuck in my mind is that I'm not going to name names, but one time a player, like, all he had to do was attend a flash mob to like finalize his grade in this class and pass the class and do well. And he just like chose not to. And I was, we kind of knew the situation. So I was like calling this player and like, hey, you got this thing at 12 o'clock. Let's make sure you're there. And he's like, no, I'm not going. I'm not going. And I was like, huh? We'll say it again. He's like, no, I'm not going. I was like, yeah, you are. Where are you? He's like, I'm not telling you. So I had to like try to find him, and I couldn't, and he didn't show up, and he didn't pass the class. And then the second one was at Princeton, when I was a player. we had just, it was like my sophomore year, the year that we ended up going to the NCAA tournament, and we just started off Ivy League play, and we played Brown Friday, Yale Saturday, and we won at Brown and won at Yale, like at the buzzer on an amazing play. And so we win, we're 2-0, starting league play on the road, feeling great. And like, we get in the locker room, and this kid who was like starting earlier in the year was a really good player. He just like gets up and makes an announcement that he quits. He's like, I'm done. Like he didn't play much, or, in these 2 games. He was like, I can't do it anymore. I'm done. And we're like, we kind of like paused our celebration for a minute, and we're like, okay, and then we're like, all right, well, we just won. We're still pretty happy. Sorry that you feel this way. And we're like, I don't think quitting on the road 6 hours or whatever, 3 hours from your home is a great idea. I probably would have waited till the following day just to make sure you're still allowed back on the bus. But anyway, so that happened, and then we all traveled home together, and then he was not on the team after that.
I mean, that's interesting. Wow, he quit on the road. That usually doesn't
with
happen.
like going like, and we were more than halfway done our season. Like it wasn't like the season had just begun. It was like we were kind of in the nitty gritty of.
This kind of entertaining part. Like, what movie or TV show title best describes your week? And a lot of people, because of the pandemic and stuff, it changes. You might be different now with family, but like, what movie or TV show title would best describe your week?
I mean, during the pandemic is like a layup, but it's been Groundhog Day. I mean, so we haven't been able to go to work, my wife and I, and we have 3 kids, and so we've been taking care of them. She'll work in the morning, I'll work towards the evening and the afternoons, and it's repeat. And until about 3 days ago, that's what it was. And we got a nanny now for the twins. So hopefully that helps a little bit. But, it was a lot of watching the kids, watching the film, making some phone calls, repeat. Luckily, we're practicing now. So that's made it more exciting. But it was pretty monotonous and kind of the same thing for a while. But everybody was safe. So I obviously not complaining. Just that's the movie that comes to mind.
Groundhog Day. I mean, that's kind of, that's probably general now with everyone. But now you've been with Brendan for 10 years, so and you may have picked up some other stuff. But like, what's your favorite word or phrase? Because Brendan has some. So, but what's your favorite word or phrase that you use?
That I use. So I guess it's like, so I played for him. He was an assistant when I was a player. So that's 4 years there, 3 years at Georgetown, and now 7. So it's 14 years of my life. So I'd say like the thing, so like, we're coaching and we're stuck. And then like if somebody, makes a mistake or does something where we like thought they were going to, make the play and they didn't, they'll be like, and I've just kind of, now I start doing that. So like we'll simultaneously, something will happen in practice and we'll both just be like, so it's not a phrase, it's a noise. But it's like a positive, it's like a disappointed yet you're close to doing the right thing. You're right there, kind of, I don't know if an ever has had that much meaning, but that's probably the one that I find myself doing the most.
Yeah, because you like you said, 14 years you rub off on each other. That's kind of, right. I mean, that definitely, there's going to be things that rub off. So
yeah,
I mean, if simultaneously, that would probably be funny. I'm sure Matt and Eddie probably get a kick out of that one, like, right. and they probably picked it up as well, since, I mean, you talking about Matt has been with y'all, getting ready to go in year 8 as well there. So, right. And I worked with him for 3 years, so I'm sure like he's picked up some stuff.
Yeah, it's always like you had to ask the guys that question, because I'm sure once they get in the locker room, who knows what they make fun of me for, and I'm sure it's like everything. But that's the one that I would recognize myself doing.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given? Because you've had some really good people around you in your life, not just from a college standpoint, but even high school standpoint. But what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
I think just like be true to yourself. Be who you are. Like, people can tell when you're faking, when you're not genuine, when you're BSing. And so I think just, in all my interactions, that's what I try to, that's what I try to do. I'm not trying to BS anyone. I'm just telling them, what I think, how to, in coaching too. I think it's like you get your players respect by like, one, knowing what you're talking about, and being able to explain things on the court, but then like not BSing them. I think good players can always kind of tell when you're not being genuine or just like, saying things just the same. It's like, I think you gotta, be true to yourself and be who you are, not try to be somebody else because you think that's going to help you, in your career or get a job, this and that. And I think if you do, act how you normally would and stay true, then like you're going to also kind of end up around people that you like and who appreciate you for who you are. And you're going to be working for people that you enjoy working for, which is, I think, really important in college coaching.
So true, man. Like, what does success mean to you?
I say the term a lot, but I'd say probably like, so I think there's like coaching success, and then there's like life success. But essentially it's kind of like maximizing your potential. So like if I feel like I've done everything that I can for the guys on the team to instill in them all the things that we think are going to help them and give them everything that they need to be successful in life and on the court, then I think I would feel successful. Like, hey, we've done everything we can do, and you kind of live with the results of that. And I think the same thing in life. Like, I think it's with your family, like you do everything you can for your kids, for your wife, and try to balance it all so that, you're able to not feel like you're neglecting one for the other. And I think that's a challenge in basketball is like, I think a lot of coaches, if you ask them when they're 70, they'll say, well, I wish I would have spent more time with my family and cared more about what my kids were doing. And so I've heard a lot of coaches say that. And so I'm trying to not be a coach that says that while trying not to have that affect my professional career. So I think that's like, it's a hard balance, but it's a fun one. Like you're around people you like at work, you're around people you like at home, and you have to give them all everything you got. And so I think that's like how I would define success, is just feeling really good about how you're, the effort you're giving your players, the effort you're giving your family, and you're doing everything you can to make everybody, in those two areas really happy and maximizing. That would be like maximizing my potential as a human being, kind of thing.
Awesome, man. You're not a self-promoter. You don't go around and I just think you do a tremendous job at what you do, and you don't tell everyone about it, which today that's become the new thing. Like, people are self-promoting themselves. But if you had to choose 3 adjectives to describe yourself, which would you choose?
Well, I don't self-promote just because I assume that everybody knows that I'm like the best coach in the country. So, it's kind of a given. That was a joke. 3 adjectives would probably be incredibly handsome, undeniable, genius, and, egoless. I don't think anything of myself.
Awesome. I like that.
There's more than 3, but I think it added to the,
and those answers, if you don't know Scott Greenman, like if you didn't know him like that, that's who he is. And that's why, he has it's interesting how much you're probably like Brendan and people don't know it. Like you're funny and like people, like you make jokes and people like, oh, okay, but like you're very funny. That's what people.
Well, it sucks when people don't know you're joking and you joke, because then it gets a little bit awkward. But yeah.
But I know I've been around.
Honesty would be if I had to give a serious answer, like I would just say whatever. I try to be genuine, try to be honest, and tell the truth to our team and whoever I'm interacting with as much as I can.
What person and or event has had the most influence on your life?
Well, I think the people, I think my parents just raised me well, I think, and kind of taught me, how to carry yourself, how to act, how to treat other people, and how to work hard, all while kind of maintaining, not taking yourself too seriously. And then I think the biggest event would be, so we had my wife had twins. Our first kid, Jordan, was a twin, and his sister Eliana, they were born at like 25 weeks, so very prematurely, and she passed away about a month after she was born, and it was right in the heart of our playoffs, actually. But so that event has had a huge impact on my life, and from since this is a basketball podcast, but I mean, just in how I am able to kind of obviously puts perspective on things, and so when you do have when you think things are going terribly wrong in your work life, there's always like there's a lot of worse things going on in the world, and at the same time I think it gives you more or it gives you more understand, it just kind of makes you want to treat everybody really well, but also like give them everything you have, because you just don't, you don't know what's going to happen, what tomorrow holds. So you want to kind of do everything you can for the people that are in your life, because that's what I want for, my kid. That's what I would have wanted for her. That's what I want for Jordan, who did survive and is doing great. And so it's like, it's given me a little bit of clarity and understanding of that.
Yeah, I feel you on that. You're so, I listened to you, and I remember when that story happened, and it was sad, and like I know a lot of people definitely reached out to you. I mean, that's how, that situation is difficult, but like, hey, like, I mean, you handled it, you moved, I mean, and you gained strength from it. You and your wife gained strength from it.
Right.
And then that's the one thing. I mean, you never forget it, but like that's something you gain strength, and you never question it, and so that's the thing you understand, and that I understand. And I'll move on to that. I'll say, like, what energizes you and brings you excitement? Like, like you said, you got the family, of course, beautiful wife, beautiful kids. Now it's basketball. You on the court. Like, what energizes you? Because you've always had that from a playing standpoint. Now in the coaching, what energizes you and brings you excitement?
Just like, I mean, we're coaches and like you said, teachers. So it's like every day you have a chance to help somebody and get better. And it's like, every year you're working with new players. So that's exciting. Just like trying to teach new people new things. And then with the guys you have, it's like, it's a constant, not only problem solving, but it's like teaching and building towards something. And it's always changing. So there's always moving parts. And it's like the fun of how do you teach somebody. My naked son just walked into the room. Go to the bathroom.
Sorry.
So you have to kind of just like it's exciting because it's new every day. And we're doing something we love. Like, I love basketball. I love trying to figure out new ways to teach people things. How can I get this guy to shoot the ball better? How can I get him to understand something? And it's like a constant challenge. And then it's like, how do you blend the individuality of it within the team? And so, and make everybody, feel a certain way. And so it's like, that's the fun part, is like, it's always new. And it's doing something that you love to do. So it's like, you should be excited about it. Like, I'm going into a gym and telling people how to, play basketball, and talking with guys that I like that are 18 to 22. Like, we have a great, awesome group of players that all like each other. So that part makes it easy too. And I think that's exciting, is like, if you have a group of players that you like, I think a lot of people probably don't talk about that a lot, but I mean, you'll have teams where you're like, it can be a drag sometimes because however it happens through, issue, a couple of bad recruits, I don't want to call them bad recruits, but a couple of guys that maybe don't have the same passion and think about things the same way you do it. Some teams aren't that much fun to coach. So when you have ones that are, it's like, it's really exciting.
Yes, that's so true. That's so true. I'm gonna ask this question because, I thought I was gonna forget it, and then I'll ask the last question before we even go. But you've been around, and I'm gonna throw two names out because I like to ask this question. Who would you want to sit down with and just talk about? Because like I said, I think you're gonna be a head coach in this business. Who would you want to pick their brain? Because you've been around two big name basketball, even though you didn't play for them or you didn't coach with them. I don't know what to say for, but you didn't coach with them. Pete Carell and John Thompson II, right? But who would you want to sit down? Three guys you would just want to go to lunch, pick their brain, and just talk about basketball. Like, who would those three guys be? I mean, you work for some. I mean, you work with, you've worked with, and then I say that, Sydney. You've worked with, and you were with, JT3. Now you with Brennan, but like, who are three guys you would want to sit down with?
Yeah, that's a good one. Damn. I probably should have thought about this. Sheesh. Do they have to be coaches?
No, they don't. They don't have to be coaches.
I would think like Eric Spoelstra, who is a coach, just because I think what he's done over kind of the course of a long period with different types of talent has been really impressive. And I think they run really good stuff on offense, and the guys, buy in and they're into it and all that stuff. I think LeBron would be a fun person to sit down to and talk to because he's a genius with basketball, and obviously he's one of the best players of all time. Those are the two that are fresh in my mind because of the recent NBA championships. But Greg Popovich would be another guy who I think is an incredible coach, who's been able to kind of get players at the highest level of basketball and been able to kind of still gotten them to buy into playing within a team concept and playing unselfishly. So I think the coaches that can do that are really impressive, because it's hard at selfishness and just wanting to kind of score, like as a coach, the hardest things to kind of overcome is like you're always preaching and teaching that, and then that's in college at every level, and it gets harder as probably go up levels in college, but then in the NBA, it's a whole nother animal, just with the guys are getting paid way more than their coach, and they can get potentially more money off endorsements if they score more. There's just so many other things that come into play, so kind of being able to see how they're able to make that happen, I think would be fun.
Awesome. And you named not only just three great basketball minds, but three great people. And that's another thing which makes them successful, and probably each one of them will be in the Hall of Fame one day. But like, they're just great people as well, not just great basketball minds. So that's a plus. And I ask this, knowing what you know now, like, what would you tell your young or younger self to prepare for this business? Like, I know, like you've been playing most of your whole life, but what would you tell your younger self to prepare for?
I think you try to think about the things more often that don't come naturally to you. And so with coaching and recruiting, it's relatively easy because you're a player and you've coached and you've played and you've recruited, so you have a feel for that stuff. But it's the questions that come up, in meetings from the head coach, it's you want to have thought about them before you get asked the question. Whether it's housing and who should room with who, and why do we think, we should have practice at this time and at that time. You just kind of have try to put yourself in the shoes of the head coach a little bit and think outside of your kind of day-to-day duties, so that you have a broader view of everything that's happening within the program. Because I just know, from early on, coaches would ask that, and I just wouldn't, I wouldn't have any thoughts or answers on some of those things. And it's that's all stuff that you need to be thinking about, in addition to, how you're going to guard a ball screen and whatever, who's going to go watch Lamar play at 3 p.m. on tomorrow. So I think it's like just trying to think outside the box a little bit. And then I think from like I don't want to call it networking, but from a relationship perspective, like, try, and it's hard at different places in different leagues, but it's like, I think you want to make friends with a lot of like college coaches too, not just be on the phone talking to high school guys in AAU. It's like, become friendly with the people that are doing the same thing that you're doing with, that are in different leagues or, similar. Cause I think you see them on the road a lot. There's a lot of opportunities to make, good connections and become friendly, and you're at hotels, and it's just like, don't be like the guy that doesn't want to talk to anyone, like put yourself out there, go have conversations, meet new people. So I'd say those kind of two things. One is more social, slash networking, and the other one's more like in your day-to-day coaching life. But those would probably be two things I would have concentrated on a little bit earlier if I'd have, known.
But you're so correct though, because until I started doing this show, I didn't realize how many guys, and it's come across the show, like they leave the show, they've seen someone else on they like, hey man, I want to watch that person, or hey, can you send me this individual's number? I've never talked to him. Like 16 years in the business, and you walk past each other. You know how it is.
Yeah.
You walk in the gym, guys are, they give you a head nod, they might speak, but they have no idea about you, and they don't even talk to each other. They always, everyone comes in and they go to their friends and talk to their friends, or they go and sit alone. They don't talk to anyone. You're there to do your job, but a lot of guys don't know each other in this business, and which is crazy. We're a small fraternity. You're a small fraternity, and you have no idea about sometimes the guy that's in your own league. So it's crazy.
And it's like and it's like one of those things where like it's just like getting out of your comfort zone a little bit. It's like if you went up to someone and were like, hey, John, I saw you, I know so-and-so who knows you, and I like what you guys do. Like, he's probably like, oh, cool, someone wants to talk to me. I don't have to sit here texting, my head coach and my wife, telling them everything's great. It's like, I think people want to meet each other. It's just like the initial interaction, and you have to follow up because you are, at these events and whatever. You do end up forgetting who you met and what you did because there's so much going on. But it's like, if you put a little bit of effort into it, I think it could go a long way.
You're 100% right. Well, look, Scott, man, I want to thank you again for being a guest on the show and being unmasked. Is there anything you want to leave with the viewers before we go?
No. I mean, that was great. I think you're doing a great job. Subscribe to Lamar Barrett's Unmasked. That's what I want to leave with the viewers. Incredibly respected in our business. Everybody loves you. So I'm just happy that you thought to have me on. I appreciate it.
And I appreciate you, man. I appreciate those kind words as well. Well, I want to thank you, viewers, for watching another great show. Stay tuned for the next guest as we get them unmasked. See you next time, and stay safe.